All right, I waited till the first round playoff games were over, and of course they have come and gone. But I do want to talk about Georgia, their offense, Gunnar Stockton, Carson Beck, what it might look like going forward, particularly here into the Sugar Bowl matchup coming up on New Year's Day against Notre Dame. I'll do full previews and breakdowns and predictions of the second round playoff games over the course of this week. But this video here, I just want to specifically talk. I've been asked a million times, what's up with, what do you think about Georgia with Gunnar Stockton? And, is he better than Carson Beck or whatever? So here you go. This is that video. Talk about Georgia's offense, what it's been, what has happened, and what it might be now going forward under Gunnar Stockton. To answer what to me it seems obvious, and don't even know why anybody needs to ask it, but I've been asked a million times. No, Gunnar Stockton is not better than Carson Beck. That's just crazy. It would be. I would be amazed if Gunnar Stockton came in and threw for 350, 400 yards, completed 70% of his passes, made all the reads, had the arm, made the throws, all that Carson Beck does. Not that Carson Beck has been some sort of Heisman-level quarterback this year. Obviously, he hasn't. He had the turnover issues in the middle of the season. But Carson Beck's a guy who's been at Georgia for 4 or 5 years. He's in his second season starting. He's got a ton of experience. He can make all the NFL throws. He's a big, tall, pocket-passing guy. And Georgia's offense this season, if you've been watching Georgia for any amount of time at all, Georgia's offense this season was very clearly catered to and around Carson Beck. I've never really seen a Georgia offense operate the way a Georgia offense has operated this season. And what I mean by that is sort of the play selection, the run versus pass percentages, things like that. Georgia has been known almost for the entirety of its history as being a running team, running back going back to Herschel Walker and then the string of running backs they had even in the 2010s. I've rattled this list off before, but there was about a 10-year period where Georgia had at least one of these running backs on their roster every single year. Todd Gurley, Keith Marshall, Sony Michel, Nick Chubb, DeAndre Swift, James Cook, Kendall Milton. I mean, the list is just on and on and on and on and on. It was like a 10-year period of just an NFL running back factory. And it predates that. I mean, you just go back through Georgia's history. It's been known as a team that's going to have a couple of good running backs. Honestly, a not very good quarterback most of the time. Now, we've had some good ones at times sprinkled in, whether you want to go back and talk about, Eric Zier or David Green or Matt Stafford or Aaron Murray, or there's been some. But I'm talking in general. Georgia's been known as RBU, a team that's going to run the ball, has a bunch of running backs, good offensive line, play good defense, but their quarterbacks have been kind of forgettable over the years. And this season, that was not necessarily the case. Georgia had a ton of injuries at the running back position, combined with the fact that their quarterback was their best offensive player, and he's a prototypical drop-back pocket passer. Tall, can make all the throws, a rocket arm, that kind of thing. And it was pretty clear early on this year that Georgia's game plan all offseason and heading into the season was, we're going to throw the ball around. I haven't gone back and looked in every year of Georgia's history for these numbers or whatever, but just from watching every Georgia game for as long as I can remember, Georgia has thrown the ball more this season than any other season in the past. The percentage is about 60-40. Normally it's about, 55 to 60% run, 40 to 45% pass. This year it's been almost 60% passing. And again, the reason is you head into the season, you look at what you have there, you go, okay, the running back situation's a little shaky. We bring an ETN in from Florida, and then we got this true freshman. The other two guys kind of in the middle, the Robinson boys, they're both injured, but we've got this NFL pocket passing sort of, quarterback. Maybe we should sling the ball around, and that's what they did. For better or for worse, I'm not here to criticize that or to praise that decision or to tell you it was right or it was wrong. That's just obviously what Georgia did heading into the season and throughout the course of the season. As a byproduct of that, you had a lot of people watching Georgia and going, what am I looking at here? Where's the running game? Where's the running backs? You look at Georgia's rushing numbers this year. They are some of the worst in program history. And I'm not saying that to say that Georgia can't run the ball or that, if it's 3rd and 2, they've got no choice but to pass it because their running backs are terrible and the offensive line is terrible. It's just a process of the decisions that were made over the course of the season to be more of a throwing team this year, to take advantage of what they perceived to be their strength, which was their quarterback, Carson Beck. So even Georgia fans have looked at the numbers this year, and scratched their head, what's going on. And now you add the running back injuries into that, and what you get is a Georgia team this season who is near the top of a lot of passing category numbers and near the bottom of a lot of rushing category numbers, right? So that's sort of the foundation going into where we're at now, which is Carson Beck gets hurt in the halftime of the Texas game, a game where Georgia was trailing, by the way, at halftime. And in comes Gunnar Stockton. Now, Gunnar Stockton was a very highly rated quarterback, but there's a lot of very highly rated quarterbacks out there. Some of them pan out, some of them don't. This is his third year in the system, or his third year at Georgia, right? So he's, I guess, technically a redshirt sophomore, but this is his third season there. Next to no experience at all. Now, he did play in several games last season. He played a lot, even in the Orange Bowl against Florida State, because it became such a blowout. But this season, as you're well aware, because you've been trolling me about it all year, Georgia's had a lot of close games. Very few blowouts for Georgia this year. So Gunnar Stockton didn't really get that much playing time at all. And I'm sure the coaches, especially now looking back, wish there would have been a lot more opportunities to put Gunnar Stockton in, but that's just not the way it went for Georgia this year. They kind of messed around in some of their games against inferior competition. And then, of course, when you have the tough games, very hard to get your backups in there. So you're looking at a situation with Gunnar Stockton where when you have to put him into the game in the second half of the SEC championship game against Texas, probably the best defense Georgia's played all year, you got a guy there that when you put him in the game, that's going to be his first SEC competition since last year. He had no snaps against SEC teams this year, Gunnar Stockton. He had played in a couple of a group of 5 games or whatever it was, but nothing against the SEC. And he comes in, and Georgia gets the win. Now, I'm saying Georgia gets the win first before I talk about Gunnar Stockton, because Georgia getting the win was not necessarily a byproduct of Gunnar Stockton. In other words, I can't say Georgia won the game because of Gunnar Stockton. He played okay, right? He played good at times. He had the really bad decision that led to the interception. And he obviously runs the ball a lot. It's kind of his thing. He's a mobile dual threat type of guy. In fact, he's the type of quarterback, he'll a lot of quarterback draws right between the tackles, RPOs, zone reads, things like that. But he didn't blow it. And I thought the rest of the team kind of helped him out there. I think the rest of the team kind of looked around and realized, okay, Carson's gone, Gunnar's in. He's really his first real experience here in a meaningful game. We're going to have to up our game around him in order for Georgia to win this game. And I think that's what happened. So again, I'm not saying any of that to dump on Gunnar Stockton or to dismiss Gunnar Stockton. I mean, look, the very first possession, Georgia gets the ball to start the second half in that game. Gunnar Stockton comes out at quarterback for his first ever meaningful snaps as a college football player, and Georgia goes right down the field and scores its first touchdown of the game. You can't completely dismiss Gunnar Stockton from that equation, right? He obviously had something to do with that. He completed a couple of short passes. He got Georgia in and out of the right plays. He made some plays with his legs, and Georgia goes down there and scores. So what does that mean? Can we take what we saw in the Texas game? What does it mean going forward? What will Georgia look like offensively for the Notre Dame game? It's never a good thing to lose your starting quarterback, but if you're going to lose your starting quarterback, having 3 weeks off, it might be the best possible time to lose your starting quarterback. Again, acknowledging there's no good time to lose your starting quarterback. But in other words, what if this would have happened against Ole Miss, for example, when Georgia played on the road at Ole Miss, right? A game Georgia lost. But what if Carson Beck gets hurt in that game? Well, then you've got only, the very next Saturday, Georgia hosted Tennessee. That's different, right? You'd rather have the 3 weeks to sort of get the new guy ready than this happened during the regular season and you get so maybe that's just me trying to put a positive spin on it. I don't know. But I do think it matters that you're looking at a situation here where Gunnar Stockton now has 3 weeks to practice leading up to the Sugar Bowl, as opposed to this injury happening at some other time where you only had 1 week, right? I think that kind of makes sense. The more time you have to practice and prepare, the better off in theory you might be. So setting that aside for a second, I want to talk about Georgia's offense overall. I think Georgia's offense, or the offense that we see Georgia run in the Sugar Bowl, is going to be unlike anything we've seen Georgia do all season. A lot of the Georgia fans and even some other people who have been kind of complaining about Georgia's offense this year and where's the run game and we should be running more and why aren't we running the ball and we're supposed to be well, I think you're going to get your wish here in the Sugar Bowl. I would be absolutely shocked if Gunnar Stockton has over 20 or 25 pass attempts in this game. I think this offense is going to look a lot more like what it looked under Jake Fromm, with the addition of a lot even, quarterback runs. And that may be something that will benefit Georgia, if not overall. Again, there is not a scenario in my mind where Georgia's a better team because they don't have Carson Beck anymore. I just don't buy into that. Carson Beck was a great quarterback. Was he perfect? No. Was he an All-American? No. Heisman winner? No. Carson Beck was a really good QB, and now you don't have him, and you got Gunnar Stockton in, and in no scenario do I think that's like a net positive for UGA. But one area where I think you will see improvement from Georgia is in the running game. When you have a running quarterback, it sort of opens things up for the running backs in a lot of different ways. Think about the difference, for example, between Carson Beck running a zone read or an RPO or whatever versus Gunnar Stockton doing it. As a defense, you spend zero time preparing for the possibility of Carson Beck taking that ball out of the running back's stomach, tucking it, and running around the corner. Zero. Because how many times is that going to happen over the course of a season? Once, twice? That's just not who Carson Beck is. That is who Gunnar Stockton is. These defenses, Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl, they're going to have to take this into account. They are going to have to commit maybe, hopefully, an additional player up towards the line of scrimmage to account for a running quarterback. This is a problem Georgia's been dealing with when it comes to opposing QBs for years under Kirby Smart. And it's a problem Georgia's going to be dealing with defensively in this game against Notre Dame. Riley Leonard is a lot like Gunnar Stockton. I'm not comparing them saying that Gunnar's as good as Riley. I mean, they're the same type of player. These are running quarterbacks who can run between the tackles, who are going to run the zone read and keep it, the RPOs, all of that kind of thing between the tackles. Can they get to the outside? Do they have some speed? Yeah. But they're not Lamar Jackson. They're not Jalen Milroe. They're not that type of running quarterback, right? They're a running quarterback that's going to average 4, 5, 6 yards a carry and pick up a bunch of first downs over the course of a game. These are the types of running backs that on 2nd and goal from the 6, you can call a quarterback draw and have a decent shot at scoring a touchdown. These are all things that did not exist for Georgia under Carson Beck. So that's kind of the positive angle of it. I think having Gunnar Stockton in at quarterback is going to open up Georgia's running game. You add to that the fact that Etienne is coming back from a rib injury. He's had 3 weeks now to rest up. Both of the Robinson boys have been basically out all year dealing with various injuries. They've now had an additional 3 weeks to heal up. Nate Frazier, who's been really our most reliable running back all season in terms of health and availability, but he's a true freshman. Well, he's now had an additional 3 weeks of practice. In other words, you're probably looking at a situation for Georgia here where their running back room is going to be at its best in terms of what it's been this season. Overall, Georgia's running back room is still not measuring up, in my opinion, to what Georgia had, say, over the last 10 years, going back through that list of names that I mentioned, going all the way back to, Todd Gurley and Keith Marshall back in 2012, 2013, Nick Chubb and Sony Michel in 2013 or 2015, 16, 17. On to DeAndre Swift after that, and James Cook and all that. It's still behind that. But in terms of what Georgia's running back room has been this season, I think the Notre Dame game will be the closest to 100% Georgia's running back room has been all year. You go all the way back to the first game against Clemson. Neither one of the Robinson boys could play. Etienne was suspended. You got there was a situation where you got Nate Frazier as your running back. Well, we had one of the Robinsons there, but he had a terrible game, and that's why Nate Frazier got in, the true freshman. But anyway, the point is, and then so you've got the running backs getting healthy, 3 weeks to rest, prepare. Etienne's back from the rib injury. He played against Texas in the SEC championship game. He should be basically 100% by the time the Sugar Bowl is played. The Robinson boys an extra 3 weeks to heal. Nate Frazier an additional 3 weeks of practice. And you add on top of that now a running quarterback. And that's what Gunnar Stockton is, and that's what he's got to be in this game. Georgia's not going to throw the ball all over the place. Let's be real. One of Georgia's biggest liabilities this season on the offensive side of the ball has been their wide receivers' inability to catch the ball. Well, one way to sort of mitigate the fact that your wide receivers can't catch is to not throw the ball. That hasn't been an option up to this point in the season for Georgia because of the running back injuries, a couple of offensive line injuries too, and the fact that you had Carson Beck there at quarterback. And you can't just hand the ball off 90% of the time when the best player on your offense is a drop back, prototypical kind of pocket passing guy. So Georgia went with sort of the air it out approach this year. Somehow they got to 10-2, won the SEC championship, and here they are. Beck's out, Gunnar Stockton's in. I think you're going to see a totally different offense than what you have seen out of Georgia at any point this season. Not only that, it's going to be different than what you had in 2017 even with Chubb and Michelle. It's going to be different than you had in 2019 with DeAndre Swift. The added element of Gunnar Stockton is something that Georgia fans have been waiting a long time to see, honestly. We have looked around for what seems like years as Georgia fans at all of these other teams in college football who have hurt Georgia over and over again with their quarterback's ability to run the ball, while we've been busy with people like Jake Fromm and Carson Beck at quarterback, people that can't really run from here to there in any meaningful amount of time. Now, again, that's the positive sort of spin on it. There are some obvious negatives here. No experience at all for Gunnar Stockton. Every single time he drops back to throw the ball is a potential miscue, a potential interception, a potential fumble. Things you really don't even think about that often. Blindside pressure. Is he going to see it? Is he going to sense it? Is he going to know what's coming? Is he going to be able to read blitzes? Is he going to be able to read coverages? Is he going to be able to progress through his reads? Is he going to get the offense in and out of the right play? What about the protections up front? All of that stuff that kind of pre-snap stuff. How's he going to handle all that? We don't really know. I find a lot of that out pretty quick in the Notre Dame game. And then worst case scenario here for Georgia in Gunnar Stockton. What if Georgia falls behind by 14 points in this game, which has happened to Georgia a lot this year? Georgia has had to come from behind in an alarming number of games this season. They've managed to do it. Carson Beck has had some really good second halves throwing the ball. You know, think what you want about Carson Beck. Georgia would not be where they're at right now were it not for Carson Beck and his ability to throw the ball and some of the comebacks that Georgia's had this season. What if Georgia finds themselves down 13, 14, 17 points at some point to Notre Dame? I don't know that Gunnar Stockton is going to be able to provide that same type of comeback as a Carson Beck would, just because I just don't know about his ability to throw the ball. Again, he can throw the ball or he wouldn't be on scholarship at Georgia, but at what level can he throw it? Again, you got to think that Notre Dame is going to do everything they can to confuse the kid, right? I mean, any defensive coordinator worth a damn is going to say, okay, we're going to disguise everything. We're going to do all kinds of stunts, exotic blitzes. We're going to show pressure here, but back off and send it over here, disguise coverages. I mean, they're going to do it all. You and I would do the same thing, and we don't know what we're doing. Even we would know to do that, right? And I guess maybe to end it on another positive note here when it comes to Georgia offensively, I guess it's a little bit of an advantage that I think Notre Dame is going to have a hard time preparing for Georgia offensively because you don't know exactly what it is they're going to do. I think you can make an educated guess if you're Notre Dame that Georgia's going to go to a lot more of the run game as opposed to the passing game, which again is what they've spent the majority of the season doing, throwing the ball about 60% of the time. Those numbers are probably going to flip-flop here. You're probably looking at somewhere between 60 and 70% running the ball in this game for Georgia and closer to 30 or 35% throwing the ball. And again, Notre Dame can probably make an educated guess that that's what's coming. Practice and prepare for some zone reads, RPOs, quarterback draws, read options, all those types of things, right, that we see sort of the athletic, mobile, dual-threat quarterbacks do. It's not going to be a surprise to Notre Dame that Georgia shows up and wants to run the ball a little more than they have over the course of the season and that they use their quarterback to do it. That's not going to be a surprise. Everybody knows what type of player Gunnar Stockton is. But they don't know exactly what types of plays Georgia will run, exactly what types of formations Georgia will come out in. Here's another possible benefit here. Georgia's tight ends have played much better over the last, I would say, third of the season than they did sort of the first half or 2/3 of the season. Maybe that's something that Gunnar Stockton can sort of develop a little bit of a kind of a comfort level. You know, tight ends tend to be security blankets for a lot of quarterbacks. They're big targets, right? They tend not to run the really long deep routes. They're more of the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 yard kind of short crossing routes, curl routes, comeback routes, out in the flat type routes. Kind of considered sort of easier throws for quarterbacks to make. Maybe that's something that Georgia can utilize with Gunnar Stockton and the tight ends. Again, realizing that the wide receivers are really the weakness of Georgia's team offensively. They don't really have a wide receiver that scares anybody. Arian Smith is really, really fast, but there's a 50% chance that if you don't even cover Arian Smith at all, he'll drop the ball. That's just, the odds have proven that out over Arian Smith's 5 years at UGA. So am I worried or concerned about Georgia heading into this game because Carson Beck is injured and Gunnar Stockton is? Well, of course. I mean, I don't think any team in the playoffs, any fan of any team in the playoffs, wouldn't have some level of concern if one of their best players was unavailable for this game. And that's the situation I find myself in as a Georgia fan. I also believe that Georgia is talented enough overall, top to bottom, that if the rest of the team plays well, and Gunnar can avoid the kind of critical mistake at the bad time, I still think Georgia's a good enough team where they could potentially beat this Notre Dame team. The line is 1.5 right now. Georgia's favored by 1.5. When Vegas put the number out initially, it had Notre Dame favored at 1.5. It's been bet the other way. Now Georgia is a 1.5 point favorite. I don't know where it's going to settle. We still got about 10 days till the game, I guess, 8 or 9 days, I guess it is, till the game. I think 2 or 3 points one way or the other is about right. I think this is going to be a really good game. Notre Dame reminds me a lot of Georgia. Really good lines of scrimmage, good offensive line, good defensive line. Notre Dame runs the ball. Riley Leonard doesn't really throw it a lot. They're one of the worst passing teams. I say they're one of the worst passing teams in the Power 5. It's not that they're bad at passing the ball. They just don't do it a lot. They're a running team. Jeremiah Love is one of the best running backs in football. Riley Leonard, of course, broke a Notre Dame record for touchdown runs. I think what you're going to see here in the Sugar Bowl is a low-scoring, almost old-school type of game. Two teams with good lines of scrimmage that are going to lean on each other and try to rely on their running games and good defense. And it may come down to which quarterback is able to make, a critical third down throw versus which quarterback makes the critical third down mistake. Obviously, Riley Leonard has a massive advantage in terms of experience. He's been around the block for years in college football, started out at Duke, now at Notre Dame. Much more nerve-wracking, I think, for Georgia to sort of imagine Gunnar Stockton dropping back on a critical 3rd and 8 as opposed to Riley Leonard. But I think it's going to be a good game. I think Georgia offensively going to be totally different than anything we've seen this year. I like that the running backs are healthy. ETN should be good. The Robinson boys, Nate Frazier's been explosive as a true freshman, and the added element of Gunnar Stockton, I think, gives Georgia something that they haven't had in a long time, which is a quarterback that can get you some yards on the ground. Anyway, it's going to be a good game. I'll talk a lot more about it as the week goes along, but I appreciate you watching and have a good morning.